guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. We are here with another reading roundtable. If you are joining us for the very first time, this is a podcast kind of where we bring on some of our bookish friends and talk about the things we're reading recently. Sometimes there are themes, sometimes it is open-ended. We have a theme this time. We asked our participant, Anne, who you will meet in a second, to bring a 5-star prediction. So a book that you think is going to be 5 stars for you personally. We are going to start by introducing ourselves if you haven't met us, and we'll talk a little bit about what we normally read, because that obviously will play into why we would think these particular books would be 5 stars. And then we'll go around again and talk about our books, why we thought it would be 5 stars, and like our actual review of them if we have it. So hopefully this will be a fun discussion, because sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. You never know. The description or blurb of a book can sometimes lead you astray, and sometimes it's just like, this book was written for me in particular. Nobody else will love this book as much as I will. And that's how it works. But as always, we will start with the lovely Gretchen.
Hi, I'm Gretchen, and I read a lot of romance on the channel, interspersed with random historical slash political nonfiction. Normally when we come on these reading roundtables, I'm not talking about romance because I'm doing reviews of those on my regular, sometimes regular, Monday posting date. But for this one, I was really happy to go back into, in a way, kind of like our reading roundtable where we read books that we meant to read in 2025. I dipped back into the list of books that I really wanted to read when they came out and just never got to, for a book that I've been so excited to read since like the second it was announced. Not even the second it came out, like the second it was announced, I was like, oh, I want to read this. Because I've read a lot of this author. There's many, many reviews of me reviewing their work on the channel. And I have some really, really complicated thoughts. So we are going to talk about romance. We're going to talk about a popular author, and we're going to, I don't know. I just don't let the internet come for me, I guess. But yeah, I'm excited to
Always
talk
your
about
most
this.
popular videos is when you hate on an author that
I
everybody
know.
else loves.
Okay, to be very clear, I don't hate this book. I have complicated feelings.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
Just complicated. But yeah, that's me.
Anne, welcome back.
Hello, everyone. I am Anne. Met I met Gretchen where we both worked at a library. I met Michaela because Michaela and Gretchen have known each other not quite since the womb, but pretty much when we start becoming our own people. You guys have been working together doing this sort of stuff, and I can talk about books. I love books, period. I probably since COVID, probably read more sort of what they call contemporary romance. Um, I'm particularly fond of learning about gender issues and different kinds of sexual. It's just it's the world I choose to know more about or I want to learn more about. So lately that's been my sort of, it's kind of a learning and a happy place to check out books that way. I also am quite fond of sort of odd, they might be literary fiction, but books of poetry that sort of combine different art forms, an artist writing about, uh, art of different sorts. Not your usual book. Through these guys, I've picked up some books that I had no idea what I was getting into, and I absolutely found favorites. Like I couldn't have picked them. I'm not sure I would have picked them, but for whatever reason, with Kayla and Gretchen in my mind, I'm going like, well, I'll just start this one. um, and this time I picked up a book that I've had on my that I've had chosen and sort of really, really wanted to read for quite some time. And just somehow the climate of our current universe, even though it's not exactly, it was just somehow triggered by this book. And it was a very long book, and I think it probably is a great book, but I couldn't finish that one. I just wasn't able to. So I don't know that I'll be able to give a review, but I'll be able to tell you why I thought it would be good for me, what, why it's been on my, 5-star list forever. And it may well end up being there. I just couldn't finish it this time. And then I snagged another 5-star tiny little book that I had, which is one of those odd books. It doesn't really fit anywhere. It might kind of be travel, but not really. It might kind of be philosophy, but not really. Um, Whatever. Yeah, but I'll let you guys know what I thought about that one. So that's where I come from today.
And hi, I'm Michaela. You usually see me talking about horror, most likely here on the channel, or queer books in general. I read just about any genre if it's queer. And I'm going to be talking about a book that is neither of those things, but it is by a favorite author. It's a controversial book for reasons of nothing to do with the book itself, and I'm going to talk a little bit around that as well. But this is an author whose writing style I absolutely adore, and every time I read one of their books, I'm absolutely floored with the crafting that goes into the books. There's a very particular voice, and it is an author that I think you could read their books over and over and over again, and every single time find something different, which is rare, I think, at least currently in the modern day. So it was an author I knew that I would love this book. It was a good reason to go back and pick it up because I hadn't had the chance to read it when it initially came out. But it is just regular old fantasy, just a normal fantasy novella. And you know how I am with novellas. I have a good time with a novella. It's a good time. So it's not my usual genres, but it is a favorite author who just doesn't out a whole lot of books for me to talk about. So that's what I'm here to do today.
One of the things that I think is interesting about, picking from a favorite author, and I talked about this again to reference the same reading roundtable where I picked up a book by an author that I really, really liked. And I think one of the things, like when an author that you've really liked has put out a bunch of good books in a row, maybe I'm just a pessimist, but I'm like, okay, they can't keep this up, right? Yeah. So all right. I have reviewed a lot of books by Emily Henry on the channel. I have loved them. I think my most recent review was either Book Lovers or Happy Place. And I think those are two really good books that are representative. Like they're two different sides of her writing, because Book Lovers is the Emily Henry that is super cute and sweet and funny and adorable. And not that it doesn't have emotional elements, but I think that one's very like focused on like the happy, sweet end of falling in love, and like a romance novel. Then you have Happy Place, which is just like very like emotionally invested, not just in the couple that's at the center of it, but also in their friend group and the length of their friendship and the changing of like, what it means to like have this friend group that you've grown up with and a relationship that you've grown up with, and how you change, and some things stay the same, but like, you begin to like spread out. And both of those books are amazing, but there are also different types of romances. So depending on if you were like, the same reader might not like both, right? Depending on where you are like mentally. I loved both. I gave them both 5 stars, and I've read other stuff of hers too, but I think that those are probably like my top 2 that are just like the same amazing depth of character writing, complex stories with multiple characters that you fall in love with, right? Because romance novels are so often can just be focused on like the people who are in love, and like everybody else is a cardboard cutout kind of moving around in the background. So to be very clear, Great Big Beautiful Life, which is the book that I will be talking about, was marketed as a romance. It won in 2025 the Goodreads Choice Award for Favorite Romance of the Year. Now, when this book was coming out, Emily Henry, when she was doing like the rounds, right, was told people that this would be different from her other books, or a departure from like her other books. And I was like, you already write some pretty like different styles of romances. So what could it be about this book that's a departure? It's not a romance. It is not a capital R romance. And marketing it as such, I think, is the reason that I didn't look at this extensively, but I'm pretty sure this is the most low rated Emily Henry book on Goodreads. And the reason being that most of those low reviews are, this is not a capital R romance novel. This is women's fiction with mystery elements that happens to have romance in it. And so, and then the people who have given it like the 5-star ratings are like I knew that this was going to be different when I went into it. And so like, I didn't have like the expectations that it was going to be like a normal Emily Henry. But yeah, so that is why I have really complex feelings about this book. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plot and like what's actually going on here. But this book almost needs like, for in my brain, there are like 2 ratings. There's a rating for it as a book, if it had actually been marketed as a genre, which it is. And then there is the rating of it as an Emily Henry romance, right? And as an Emily Henry romance, it is not my favorite. That romance lacks entirely the depth that makes all of her other romances pop off. As women's history or women's fiction with a mystery element, and like, I was crying at the end of this book. Like, I was emotionally invested, but not in the romance, because the romance is not the focus of this book. So this is the story of Alice. This is a single POV romance, which already, I struggle with those. But it's a single POV, and Alice is a struggling writer. And she has lost her dad in the past couple of years. She has a strained relationship with her mom. Not a bad one, but in the sense of like, her dad was the one that got her, and her mom is really struggling in his absence to like communicate with her daughter. And like, she writes for a celebrity magazine, and like, her sister is off working for the Peace Corps. And so like, but she's able to track down this woman named Margaret Ives, who is this very elusive, like, think like daughter of like a news scion meets like a Kardashian. She was married to a rock star. And so in her youth, she was like in the tabloids all the time. And then her husband tragically died in an accident. And she like disappeared, and no one has like really not known where she's gone. And Alice is able to track her down and basically interview for the chance to write Margaret's life story as like a biography. She gets there only to find out that Margaret is interviewing multiple people for this job, and the other person is a gentleman named Hayden, who has very recently won the Pulitzer for a different celebrity biography that he did. And so Margaret basically tells them that she will give them each like a week to gain her trust and see which of them she wants to write her story. And so she makes them sign like crazy NDAs. So Hayden and Alice aren't even able to talk to each other about this. But they're like on this tiny little island in Georgia, so they keep running into each other. There's definitely an attraction there that they're fighting because they're both, fighting for this job. And they have an attraction, but at the same time, like, they're really worried that if one of them gets it and the other person doesn't, that it become really poisonous for any potential relationship that they're starting. So they're like trying to fight their attraction as much as possible. And that's basically it to their romance. The main part of this story is Alice and her conversations with Margaret. which are really interestingly done because you kind of start off with like in like a dialogue, like they're having a conversation, right? And it's like written as if, you know, there are two people talking to each other. And then it kind of transitions, like there's a new chapter and then it goes their story and they're being like the tabloids, right? Like Margaret Ives was a party princess who like drank and did drugs or whatever. And then it goes her story. And then it's kind of more like a narrative, like the conceit is that Margaret is telling this to Alice, but it's written more as like Alice will eventually write it. And I think it has a lot of really interesting things to say about fame and money. Like what it means, because like, so Margaret grows up in like a generationally wealthy family. And her eventual husband, who is the rock star, he came from nothing and became something. And so like they talk about the different, like their different ideas about money and about fame and being in the spotlight, and also like the torture of like having everything that you could ever want, like a pony, a helicopter, but like having parents who are just like screaming and fighting and you're constantly left alone all the time, and people are writing about how your life is a fairy tale when you're just like locked in the castle all day. And but I think it hugged the line really well of you never went, oh, like poor little rich girl like type of a thing, but like talking about it in a way that felt genuine, without me as a poor person being like, yeah, I feel so fudging sorry for you. But that's the thrust of the story. And what you discover as the book goes on is that Alice knows very early on that Margaret is lying to her about some of the details. There are some things that she's not saying. And Hayden also begins to realize that Alice is lying to him. And they both know she's lying, but they can't talk about, you know, the conversation that they're having and why she's lying. And so the actual thrust of this story is, what is Margaret not saying? Because it is obvious that this generational story that she's telling is more complex than what she is admitting to Alice. It will eventually tie all of their stories together, but that's the actual thing that you're reading going, what's going to happen? It's not, will they kiss? Will they get together? Will their relationship be successful? The focus is absolutely not on the romance. Like the book is like this much Margaret, this much Hayden. Like, so again, it's this really crazy feeling of like I said, in the end, when they were talking about like what it means to potentially be limited by your past, or like things that we maybe don't admit to ourselves, or what we are willing to confront and what we aren't willing to confront. And like there's so much. I mean, like I said, when I was reading like the last part of this book where it all like kind of like emotionally crescendos, I mean, I was crying. Like I was just like, this is like really well done. But it has to do with Margaret and Alice's story, not Alice and Hayden. And honestly, I felt like the way, I'm not going to spoil it, but I kind of felt like the way that it kind of did wrap all their stories together in the end almost made it a little bit more cheap, rather than just kind of letting this just be like an interconnected story of like of lives, you know, that happened to come together at this moment, and what talking about the past revealed about the present, kind of a thing. So it's crazy because I think that it's a well done book. I do think that structurally, again, separating it off from like as an Emily Henry romance, like ignoring that part of the equation. Structurally, I do think it's a little bit weird with like the going back and forth between Margaret's story and Alice's. There's like something in the structure that's a little bit choppy. But the thing is that if you were looking for like women's fiction, I would recommend it. If you're looking for an Emily Henry romance, please read one of the other ones. And so it's just like this really complex feeling that I was left having about this book. Like, I mean, and again, how do I rate it, right? Like, as an Emily Henry romance, I did not enjoy it because it did not do the depth of like personal relationships in terms of the romance that I come to love. But as like a book with a genuine soul, it was wonderful. I don't think it was perfect. I still don't think in either equation it's like a 5-star book for me. Um, but yeah, it's just like I have, like I said, how do I categorize this book? How do I rate this book one way? Like, I don't know. I think I came out with like 4.25 stars, which I feel comfortable with because again, it is a genuinely, for the most part, well written, especially character and relationship book. But man, I got to the end of it, and like I said, I was just like, normally I rate books right after I read them because otherwise I'll forget to do it. And I finished reading it, and I think the first thing I did rather than reading on a storygraph was I texted Michaela, "I am confused."
Yeah.
That was like stop number one because I was just like, I don't like, I'm crying, but also I'm disappointed, but also that was really good, but also it wasn't what I wanted. So yeah, complex feelings about this book. Will I 100% continue to read everything Emily Henry writes? Yes. But I do hope that she is able to, and I don't know, right? Because like obviously her fame, especially now that People We Meet on Vacation is a Netflix movie, they've optioned. Actually, I think Book Lovers and Happy Place have been optioned by Netflix for movies. Like, she's known as a romance writer, but I feel like if you compare this back to when we did read the books that we read for books we wish we had read in 2025 at the beginning of the year, when Sarah McLean came out with her not capital R romance novel, which was a complete departure for her, and she's written like 30 historical romances, right? The first thing she said in every single thing was, "This is not a historical romance." And the book art looked completely different from anything else that she's published. And again, historical romance to contemporary fiction is a little bit easier to differentiate, right? But like Great Big Beautiful Life looks exactly like the covers of the rest of her books. It was, and I think even though she went out on the circuit and said that this was a departure for her, I think that the publisher did her a disservice
Yeah, how many
by not.
people look that deeply? They just pick up a book. Yeah, most people aren't chronically online in the same way that we
Yeah.
are, I think, with their reading. They just
Yeah.
pick it up because they know they like Emily Henry romances. Here's
Right.
another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is like, you would never pick up like Sarah McLean's book and be like, yes, this is going to be what she has done before. Like, it
Yes, yeah.
visually is just different.
Right.
And when you even read the description of Great Big Beautiful Life, it focuses on Alice and Hayden, which is not the focus of the book.
Even the colors are this. I mean, I've only seen the cover of the book. I haven't read it yet, but it really does. It doesn't look any different than any of her. All of hers sort of look vaguely the same. The covers of the books and the cover art. I don't know if they're done by the same person or some computer,
They
but
sure look like they are.
they sure look like they are. And this one is
Yeah.
exactly like the others. Huh.
Yeah.
And it was so clearly sold that way, if that's the way they're describing it. So,
Well, and then, I mean, you don't know if like, she had, an X number book deal, right? And they're all with the same publisher who publishes romances. And so like that, but again, I think if you go to like the ratings reaction, right? There are people who went into it knowing that it was going to be different and they were able to appreciate it for what it is. But again, I do believe it's the lowest rated book that she has out. And this will feed into something Michaela will say later, because we talked about this before we got on. But like, people I think kind of bombed their rating a little bit below what I believe the book deserves because it wasn't what they wanted, or what they expected. And it's not their fault that if the book looks like all her other books, it sounds like all her other books in the blurbs, Like, how are they supposed to have found like the interview on Good Morning America or whatever where she was talking, where she's like, yeah, by the way, this is a departure, right? There's nothing to signal that otherwise. So yeah, I can't certainly blame those people. But I do think it's a well-written book that did make me cry. But
It wasn't what you were looking for in the moment.
no. Well, and I mean, like, I read it in one sitting. I was like, once I realized that there was like this mystery here that I needed to unpick. And I had some theories as we were going along. Like I said, one of the reveals in the end, I think I don't think we needed it. I think it was extra. And it just kind of made it a little weird. I understand why it was there, but I think it was only there because it was trying to shove it into a romance hole. And I'm like, if we had let that go,
Yeah.
we didn't need that. It could have just been, this really emotional, traumatizing life that Margaret has led, kind of bleeding in together with Alice's relationship with herself, with her mom, with her deceased father. Like,
Do you think that was a author thing or a publisher thing? Because I do feel like sometimes like a publisher will say, but you're the romance person, so like beef up this romance bit a little bit, bring it back to this, because that's what people expect from you. And especially if they were planning to sell it the way that they're selling it, because again, the marketing side of the book is usually not the author's control with the cover or anything like that. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the thing that happens in the end, these are
spoilers.
spoiler hands. Spoiler hands. Spoiler hands. I'll put these down when I'm done spoiling the end of this book, so you can just mute me. We can come back to this. Spoiler hands.
Spoilers.
Okay. So basically what you find out in the end is that Margaret never intended to write a biography. She contacted Hayden to meet Hayden because Hayden is her grandson. And then Alice found her on her own. And Margaret, like thinking on her feet, concocted this like week-long trial thing to try to get Hayden to stick around and make it seem legitimate. But in the end, what it just kind of feels like is that this whole side plot is manufactured to fit Hayden into the storyline.
Okay.
And like, you could have just said that Margaret wanted to write her life story. She had reason not to trust anyone because she's been written about so poorly in all the tabloids. Like, so like this week-long thing to get to know Alice would have made sense. And I think you could have had that, because then it's like, Alice figures it out and Margaret tells her that she can't tell Hayden because she's not ready for that to come out. And so that breaks up Alice and Hayden because Alice can't lie to him. So she's like, I'm going to go.
It's
and
your
like that's
third
your
act
like
breakup there.
Third act breakup. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So like if we weren't shoving it into a romance hole, we could have
done that.
Avoided some of this. So that's what I mean. Like it didn't have to. And at that point, it's so secondary because there's already been so much emotional stuff with Margaret and Alice and Margaret's life. So, all right. Spoiler hands coming down. I mean, because I didn't even get to the whole point where like Margaret's sister was in a cult. That was a whole thing.
Okay. Sure.
So yeah, I don't know. I would have been curious to see what this book would have looked like if released from romance tropes. I think some of it would have flowed better. But I don't know if that's her choice or their choice, because did she set out writing this as if it was a romance and then the other part grew? Right. And then at that point, she's like, well, this was the story that I had. So
you guys have occasionally gone back and read books whose covers have changed along. And we've talked about covers every now and then. This almost sounds like we'd like to have the author do what they wanted to. What was the author's original intent? And then we could learn this was, I really was writing a romance and then this came up and like, well, would you be willing to write the other story? Like take out the romance. Like, would you be willing to rewrite this book?
Yeah.
Now that you discover, whatever the story was, I would love to see.
I want the Schneider cut of Great Big Beautiful Life.
Yep. Perfect.
Well, if she ever does that, or you propose it, go propose it to her. Send her a letter and say, "We are Gretchen and Michaela. We've been."
Hello, I really love this book, but I don't want it to be a romance. And if you knew who I was as a reader, you would understand how wild of a sentence that is for me.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, I really love her stuff. And I'm really excited and mildly terrified to see Book Lovers and Happy Place become Netflix properties, because there are just some things that don't translate from books into
Right.
Film or TV shows, but if done correctly, those are my top two favorites. And I would recommend them. Again, if you want a cute, fun one, Book Lovers, and then if you want like the more emotional side, Happy Place. I've reviewed both of those on the channel, so you can go see me talk about those in more depth. But yeah, if you want a romance novel, this is not it.
But great for the chicklet people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I cried. They were also naked a couple of times. It was not important.
Is that the assessment of a romance book?
How many chili peppers, Gretchen?
2? Maybe it was open door when they did get there. It was they were naked.
Excellent.
But it was at that point, I'm like, I'm really happy for you. Can we move on to figuring out more of the mystery? Because I don't like finish quickly.
It's another sort of a measuring criteria that we don't have. Like, what was your response? Did you want to stay in this particular part of the book, or did you want to get through it to the other side?
Listen, you don't often read romance for the plot. And I was going, where's the plot? Give it back.
Fair enough.
Excellent.
So anyway, I'm done. I think I've given Michaela enough material for our short here.
Maybe.
And would you like to tell us about your books?
Yes, I will go ahead and tell you about my books. The first book, The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese, and if I mispronounce that, it's appealed to me since it came out, and I've had a lot of friends and reviewers sort of say, this is like their favorite book on the planet, and I'm like, oh, I'm adding it to my favorite book on the planet potentially. For me personally, the concept I love for better or worse, ladies, I love the cover. I love the title. The Covenant of Water just sounds like it's down my fishy Pisces alley for no intelligent reason whatsoever. But this is how, this is not the first time I choose books by sort of superficial reasons, but just, I'm like, what is this book about? And I knew it was going to be a saga, which are not usually my favorites, but I knew it was going to be 700 some odd pages long, but I'm going like, clearly some of my favorite book people absolutely loved this book. And that was how I'm like, I gotta get to this. And I've sort of been putting it off and putting it off. And it's a book that is set in India, but it, like I said, 700 pages. I can't remember how much, 80 some odd chapters, split up into parts where a different character does each part. I only know this because I went through the first two, and then I sort of skipped through to see that different people's stories were being highlighted in each one. And it travels from about 1900 to 1970. So that's the, just the premise, just the basics construct of the whole book. Um, and part one is about it starts out with a 12-year-old, and there's, she's 12-year-old in India in 1900. She, her father has died, who was sort of like Cinder, was her beloved father, and mother loved dad. But the family's been torn apart because dad died, and the uncle is marrying her off to someone, far, far away in a distant planet, in a different community. And she's not even fully aware of this. Um, and the person she marries he's a 40-year-old, he's a recent widower, he has you know, a little boy. Right now I can't remember, was he 5? Was he 3? He was pretty small when she comes there. Um, eh, so, there's the whole thing about Indian arranged marriages, but the family she's going to seems really lovely. The aunt and the child, and the husband looks at her and he walks out of the church. So I'm going, well, that's a good man. I'm not going to marry a 12-year-old. I've already got one kid. Why would I want two of them? But his sister convinces him other side, so they get married, but he essentially stays away from her. She grows up sort of being sort of a semi-mother, or, mother figure to a 3-year-old boy, and they sort of grow up together, and, that changes over time. So nothing that dramatic, nothing that sort of shocking to my senses. At this point, I'm really fascinated by, the setting. The writing is spectacular. She is completely sort of connected to the water. She loves jumping into the water, but her husband or her sort of person who is more like a just out there doing stuff, um, has a terrible fear of water, and so does the son. She tried to give the son a bath, and he completely freaked out, and she's never able to. He, sponge baths and whatnot. So the one family that she moves into has people who are terrified of water. Not all of them, but certainly her husband and her, who would be her son now to some extent, or another stepson. So there's that contrast, is that sort of conflict is set up in the beginning, and she doesn't understand why. And by the end of their chapter, she learns, why that is. Apparently there's a curse somehow on the family. Certain people are born terrified of water, and they will eventually die by water. And at the end of that chapter, she says, she who has come from sort of one of the early Christian followers, as the Christians came into India at some point, her family follows them. So she sort of entrusts the solution to this, the resolution of this part of the family, the fear of water, to being solved by God. And then the second chapter starts out with someone in Ireland. It's like, wait, I was in India. Why am I in It's actually Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we are back in England. Someone's has a terrible family life, medical school, blah, 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 blah. He ends up in India because, he's a subclass in his homeland, and then coming to India, all of a sudden he pops into being the top class because he's white and we're in colonial India. Again, nothing sort of to hit my sensibilities, but as this story drags on, this drags on, I shouldn't say, it's actually very interesting. It's very well written, but the story involves, I don't know, humans just being human. I mean, he starts having, there's someone who hates him in the hospital where he is, and that guy sort of runs the hospital, and of course this guy ends up being attracted to his wife, and she doesn't like her husband. It's just like, and I'm at this and I'm thinking, for what, I'm sorry to say, but the climate and the stories of what we don't know happening in white power struggles, of abuse of children and abuse of women and trafficking of people, and essentially killing, if not people physically, killing their right to be people. I just couldn't go on, and I'm really sorry, because I think I probably would like the book a lot. I just couldn't finish it. So I don't have a rating for this book, ladies. It's just not, it's not there. But I want to get back to it because it's really well written. I just can't, I couldn't handle it at this
That was
point.
gonna
And that,
be my question was, do you feel like it's just a not right now, wrong time, right book thing, where it might be the right book when we're a
it
bit
might be the right book at
further
some
out?
point. I don't, yeah, I'd have to see. I mean, I've, of course, after I literally couldn't. I just put it down. There was something about it that just triggered. I just somehow, I, I just want people to be smarter about everything.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid. Uh, and characters inevitably in books are stupid. Otherwise, we wouldn't have books. That's
Yeah.
how we have books.
That's how you get
But
plot. They have to be
yeah.
messy.
um, so I think possibly, though I've read more reviews about it, just to sort of go, and there are people who thought the ending was sort of, when all of these stories, after chapter 87 or wherever, all of these stories come together. My suspicion would be, at this point, I'm propelling into the future, but that the doctor from England, and the husband who is supposed to die from water, he'll eventually figure out. I think he's going to be the solution to, do I know this? No, I haven't projected forward. That's my prediction. um but people said it was a little bit too sweet, a little bit too tied up, a little bit too, but I don't think that'll bother me in today's climate. Being just nicely tied up with all the bows, pretty, with little curly cues at the bottom, would be just.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't do it. So I'm sorry about that, because I think it would be interesting to find out what I think of it by the end. Um, so I hit another book that was a 5-star book on my shelf, and it's very, very short. I went about as short of a book, because this one not only is less than 100 pages,
Mm.
it has photographs.
Yeah.
um, it's a book called A Week at the Airport, and the author, Alain de Botton, he's a British, I believe he's a British author, um, was hired in 2009 to spend a week at the airport by the person and the companies that run the airport, to just sort of sit there and write a piece of literature with photographs about their impressions of life in the airport, like a complete carte blanche. Like, when you give, rarely do artists get paid and said, you write whatever you want.
Yeah.
He was, and so, just as a concept, I thought this sounds fascinating. Um, and it's set up, by where it's sort of, I think it starts out, the introduction is sort of, the hotel that he stays at, and how to get to the concourse. It's connected, umbilical cords, and his writing is very poetic. Um, I think departures, waiting in the terminals, the terminal architecture. He sort of focuses on, the things that as he sort of eloquently sort of states in different ways, that we don't. When we're in an airport to get somewhere, we could give a hoot about what's going on around us or why it's there or even what's there. Just get me to my gate, get me there early enough so I can stand in line before I need to get on my flight or get off my flight and get through customs and all those things. But it's basically a little book of philosophy. And the company and the man who hired him to do this really wanted to put a piece of this would be a free piece of literature that you could pick up about this artist's impressions on the airport. And
I'm sorry, how do
in
we
the
get more opportunities for this type of art? Like, I'm
I know.
I'm
I
floored.
don't. I exactly. It sounds like something from the medieval, or somewhere
Yeah.
from Italy in the, 1600s, where a patron says, "No, no, you can paint my family as they look, not as I want them to be."
So wait, is he staying in a hotel and then in the airport during the day?
No, no, he's there. He's in the airport. He's at an airport hotel, not actually in the airport, but he's at a hotel that is connected by an umbilical cord, as he calls it, to the airport. And he's given vouchers about places to eat. 2 nights he'll be able to, he can have dinner at the hotel, you know, money to spend at the gift shops.
I guess I was like, were they making him sleep on the airport floor?
No, they didn't do that. But he takes you into, I mean, the first thing that I had no idea, I didn't know that there was a place in every airport where you can, probably every terminal, where there is a place for you to go if you're religious to, pray to your gods and leave them. You can actually light the candles that you bring in, but you can bring in a candle and, pray for your safe passage to wherever you're going. I'm like, that's fascinating. Um, he spent time in the Concord area of Terminal 5 of the airport, where the first class people, get to
Mm,
hang out in leather seats and have waiters walk around and offer them, foie gras and champagne or whatever else they want. While the other people, he goes, why do some people get to sit in this? And, the question of other people, it may not be colonialism, but it's, the caste
classism.
system. Yeah, the caste system still exists in the airport, at least, poverty and wealth are two different places. Um, it was actually it was a fascinating book. Um, my biggest issue with it, I would have to say, was the author's voice. The introductory chapter was such pretentious language, and I read a lot of books. I know a lot of words. I'm thinking, like, there isn't a person on the planet except perhaps you and your Eton grandfather. And I truly don't know anything about this author, but it was, I mean, vocabulary words that you have not seen. I didn't even see words like these in, the SAT preps that we did way back when in high school. Um, so I found that a little off-putting. I thought, if this, I would just tend to think of my audience a little bit as I do if I were a writer. Like, you shouldn't write like you've got 29 different languages that you can speak with complete, I don't know. It just felt very, very highbrow. I thought an average person, particularly if you think of the multiple languages that come through an airport, if they were to pick this up, someone who didn't speak, even someone who did speak English, would be looking at this going like, huh? And it doesn't stay that way. The language comes down from loftiness, but the beginning is very, very highbrow. Um, so I, for better or worse, was not fond of the author's voice. I liked in places where he just came through sort of talking like a regular human. It had some great philosophies, sort of the one thing I had never thought about, I'll just bring up this, is that I've heard it in relationships where people think they'll leave one relationship and get into another and everything's going to be fine. And you will often say, yeah, but you're going, you're going into the new relationship and that's not gonna, you're still going to be there. This guy made the point that the entire travel agency essentially, sells you pictures of Greece, and there's the blue ocean and the bougainvilleas on the porch and the drinks that you're going to have, and you'll bring your whole family and you guys are just going to have a great time. But he says, when you travel, you end up going to where you're traveling to. So whatever problems you had before you left, whatever the relationship or whatever, lack of compassion or anger or whatever you have, it's going with you and it's likely to come out because, it's a new place. People react to stress. I just thought that was kind of fun. It was a good book, sort of little bits of philosophy. I liked his ending, or close to the end. One of the things that as he sort of philosophizes about travel and different areas of the airport, he ends up going that travel agents, rather than asking, where do you want to go, should ask what we hope to change about ourselves for, after we've had this trip. It was good. If I had to rate it, just because I don't think I would get this for myself, I tend to get books from the library, and there are a few, actually many that I review with you guys that I'm like, oh, I really am going to get that book for my shelf. Unlike Michaela, who is able to collect such a wide variety, I think I'm at a point in my existence where, well, someone's going to have to throw it out someday, not too far in the future. So
Listen,
probably, the ones that are around me are very, very, very special and like unique, and I really will go back and read them. I will probably reread this book, but I don't know that it's one that I want to, I'm not sure it's one that I want to hold on to. I didn't find it shifted too much in me. It made me aware of stuff that I was never aware of, and for that, I think it's kind of brilliant. I just don't, who thinks about airports? I don't. And I think that's part of the point. This is, if they want to give this away for free, I would highly recommend you take it and read it, because it'll be a lot more interesting than the, how to open the door in case of emergency. I don't know, 3.8, 4 point, it was interesting, but I don't think it met for whatever reason, I thought it was going to be a 5-star for me, because they usually are. And at this point, it just somehow seems to be, in some points, the beginning of the book just felt very, very highbrow, and somehow its whole purpose seemed to me, at least from the description by the author, to be sort of a, hey, this is what happens behind the scenes at an airport, or these are my impressions behind the scenes. I guess in some ways this seemed like a book where the author was showing themselves off. It felt a little bit his knowledge and his awareness and all the things he knows from all over the world, and he's traveled here, there, and everywhere. Most people are not going to know where the heck that dot is that you're talking about even is on the globe. And I found that just fundamentally off-putting.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. Like, he could literally reveal the secret to life in the later chapters. And like, he could have cured cancer and we would not know. Because I think the general person would read like the first part of that and be like, bye. Like, I'm not.
I'm going back to reading the diagram of the airplane.
Yeah. Why there's a People magazine right next to this, and I think that like I'm gonna learn if I'm hot or not here. Like,
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think fundamentally that's my issue. Again, there were brilliant sort of little bits that just made me go, "That's a really cool insight." There's no way I would think of that when I will never think that while or maybe I'll think it now that you've given me articulated it for me, but I'm not going to be thinking about most of these things.
as someone who has to be in an airport in 2 weeks, I can confirm that my entire emotion will be panic the entire time.
And most people's are.
Yeah.
And so again, it was fun for it was interesting to see that, but I think the author's tone was just a little bit it was truly too much. I would love for you guys to read the introduction. I may have to just because it's like, I've never heard Gretchen or Michaela, but two of my bookiest friends talk about
Yeah.
anything in this way.
Yeah.
And as someone who is like engaged in a pretentious degree, by which I mean just like a PhD, that's how people feel about it. I actively sit there and go, I never want to speak like this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm just like, if
Yeah.
my ideas don't translate into the world, how are they supposed to do things? Right? Like the fact that I know this 7-syllable word, great, fantastic. What was my SAT score? No one cares. Like, if no one else can understand what I'm saying, that it doesn't, again, it doesn't matter if I've cured cancer, if I can't like translate those ideas.
Right. And it was that. It was true. It was, at least from my perspective. And like I said, I know a lot of words, and I'm like, I know by context what that word is, but I have never heard it used in a sentence. So, but that was I think my biggest deal about it. I think also part of that comes from my profession. I'm a museum educator, and so you gotta think about who you're writing this for. And this felt, I don't even know who. I can't imagine a literary person, other than Uncle Henry, who owns, the Highlands entirely and has a huge library out on the heathers in the I don't know who. I don't know who does this. I really don't. I don't live in English society, so I don't know if there are actually people like that. But it was good. I'm glad I read it. But yeah, it's not one that's staying with me permanently. But I think I will go back to the Covenant of Water just because it is fascinating. And I think that's what I learned by talking about it with you guys today. It was just like, yeah, it is one that I want to go back. There was enough there, but just for whatever reason, it just hit something and my body's like, yeah, no, that's not going in right now.
Valid. My turn?
Yeah.
Your turn.
Okay. I am going to talk about The Narrow Road Between Desires by Patrick Rothfuss, which is his most recent book. I looked it up. It came out in 2023. It is technically a reworking of a short story that came out in Rogues, which was an anthology collection put together by George R.R. Martin in like 2015, 2016-ish. So it's like a decade old short story that has been reworked. The short story was about 60 pages. This book is about 200 pages. So a lot of content has been added versus the short story. Some of that is illustrations. Actually, I could probably find them. They're not everywhere, but every once in a while you'll get like full illustrations, and the beginnings of the chapters will be I guess illuminated kind of, where it's got like headers and things for the first part. The start of this book has a little thing from Patrick Rothfuss that says, if this is your first book of mine, don't read this one. Like, it's not the perfect introduction to my world, which I totally understand because it is following a character from his main series, The Kingkiller Chronicles. Most of people know this. The Name of the Wind is the first book in that series. And this book had a very rocky introduction to the world for a couple of reasons. The first one being that the Kingkiller Chronicles is unfinished. The third book in that trilogy has not come out. It's been over 10 years since the second book came out. People are very pushy about wanting the end of that series. And when they heard that a Rothfuss book was coming out, they all assumed it was going to be book 3. And then it was not book 3. It was this one. And if you go onto Goodreads, there's so many 1-star reviews that have nothing to do with the book. They didn't even read the book. It's just them complaining that it was not book 3. And then there will be people who did read the book and they're still rating it negatively. And the negative review is just them being bitter about it not being book 3. So I gave it 5 stars. I have read the original short story. I had Rogues when it first came out, so I read it then. I don't think most people have read that short story to begin with, and anthologies like that don't last very long in like a lifeline of books. They generally will come out usually just in paperback. I think that one did have a hardcover and a paperback run because it was put together by George R.R. Martin, so it had enough like name power behind it to last a little bit longer, but I doubt it had a second printing past that first paperback printing. So if you wanted to read that story now, 10 years out, you probably can't get access to it. So this was a way to get that story, and it has added content to it. If anybody knows Rothfuss, as like a fan of his, he's a chronic editor. He's a person that likes to go in and like tweak and add and do all of these things, and like, I'm not surprised at all that he wanted to revisit that story and bulk it up and add to it. But I know why a lot of people were like upset, and it has nothing to do with this book and everything to do with just like the circumstances around this book, which bothers me. And I've talked a lot about how the Kingkiller Chronicles for me is one of my favorite series of all time, even unfinished. Like, I don't need to get that last book to feel like that was a worthwhile time of my reading. It introduced me to like a style of writing that I absolutely love. Rothfuss has a voice and a syntax structure that is entirely his own. Nobody writes like Rothfuss writes. He is very unique. And I've talked about on the channel way back in the day, Gretchen and Taylor are very much the like fantasy fans when we were doing book club, and I was like, I'm a sci-fi person. Like, if I'm doing speculative in that vein, I almost always lean sci-fi versus fantasy. I struggle with like traditional high fantasy books. I just find it boring. I'm not into the whole political machinations. I don't enjoy it very much. So it's saying something when I say that world sucked me in. And Rothfuss is also an author. Like I said, he's chronically adding and tweaking and doing all of these little things to his books that you can reread his books over and over and over again and find new things every single time, because he seeds things from the second book and the first book. And I'm sure there's things in the third book that hasn't come out that has been seeded in the previous 2 books, and they will change the way that you read those books once you know to look for it. He's like an author that you want to break out highlighters and sticky notes and be like, this was mentioned here. But also it will be so innocuous. It will be a sentence that fits perfectly in the paragraph that you are reading, and you won't think twice about it until you have a revelation somewhere farther along, and then you go, you mentioned this books ago, and I didn't think for a single second that was important. It was just somebody talking, but it was, and that one line maybe changed so many things, and I should have been paying attention and I didn't. And that's just like such a Rothfuss thing. So that is all here in this one. The plot of this one follows Bast, who is part of the frame narrative of the Kingkiller Chronicles. If you haven't read the Kingkiller Chronicles, I do think that it's helpful to have read them before going into this one when it comes to understanding the characters, their relationships, and there'll be a lot of like terms thrown at you that you won't understand what they mean, but the story does stand up on its own. So I think that if you just wanted to try it, you could. You just might be lost a bit with some of the references that are being made. But it follows Bast, who is an apprentice to the protagonist of the Kingkiller Chronicles. He works with him at an inn in a small town on the edge of the world, in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And he's learning magic from the innkeeper. The rest of the town doesn't know that. He just seems to be the, like, barkeep help boy to them. And another thing we know about Bast from the original series is that Bast is Fae. He is some sort of Fae creature. He is not human. Nobody knows that, though. Like, he's, like, glamored so that he looks like a normal human person, but he is not. So those are the things you need to know about Bast going into the story. And then if I were to, like, water down the narrative of it, it is Bast has some magic, and he uses that to his advantage by using the children of the village that they live in to trade secrets for different things, like giving them knowledge. He has a very specific way of doing this. He has a tree that is the lightning tree. It is an old dead tree that was struck by lightning. It sits there. On the hill that tree lives on, there is a stone that juts out, and he has a rule that any child who's shorter than that stone can come to him and trade whatever they have for whatever they want. Usually it's an answer to 3 questions, and they may trade a secret. Like, I know where the guy that does the moonshining keeps his stills, so that you can go and find the moonshine later, and I'll tell you where it is, but you need to answer me 3 questions. Or, I know where the hot young 20-something baker's daughter goes to take her bath in the afternoon, and I will tell you where that is if, whatever else. So the course of the story is a bunch of little sections where children come up to him and they do a bunch of trades. Throughout the course of the story, he keeps getting niggled by this one kid who is too old to come to the tree. He has aged out within the last year, but he really needs something from Bast. And, this is fed to you over the course of a couple of stories because he's trying to get all the other kids to help him get Bast to help him. Eventually, he tricks Bast, most likely unintentionally, but we don't 100% know this, by having one of the kids give Bast a gift. And the way that it works with fairies is if they take a gift, they then have to return something of equal value. And he unintentionally gives something that is a very heavy gift. So he would have to give something very important in return, or else be beholden to this child forever, where he cannot harm the child, he can't touch the child, that child has power over him, essentially. And he's not 100% sure whether the kid has worked out if he is a fairy and knows that this gift is this way, or if it was just a bribe to try and get him to do the thing that he wants him to do. So eventually he does have to meet up with that child, and that child says, I need you to help me get rid of my dad. He is a drunk, and he beats me and my mother and my younger siblings, and I need him to go. And Bast is like, I have to do this thing because you have given me a gift. I don't have no way to not do it. He doesn't say that to the child, but he's thinking it. And he says to the child, you need to be very specific. Do you want him dead, or do you want him gone? And then the kid's like struggling, like, well, if he goes away, he can come back. And he's like, I want him gone, but I want him gone forever. Because if it was just dead, I could kill him. Like, I could do it. I don't want to, but I could do it if it was just dead. I need him gone and never coming back. And Bast's like, okay. And then the story goes from there, where he has to figure out how to make this man leave. And in true Rothfuss fashion, every single little piece and story that you have had up until this point, that every piece of knowledge that he has taken from the children will all work together to resolve this overarching plot. And I don't want to spoil it because it is beautiful and, like, honestly astounding. The first thing I said to Gretchen when I got on here was, like, it is so, like, refreshing to read something that has so many layers and so much care put into it and doesn't hold your hand. Like, it is doing what it's doing, and either you will notice things or you won't notice things, but it is there and it's not going to spell it out for you. And we had a discussion about whether foreshadowing in the modern times is much more like a bunch of neon signs pointing at something going, this will be important, and Rothfuss does not do that. It will be there, and if you go back and look at it, you're like, I see what you did there. I see what you did. You seeded it here, but he does not make it obvious that that's what is happening. And again, there is no one who writes like Rothfuss writes. For better or for worse, some people bounce off of it. They don't enjoy his writing style. If you would like to know whether you would like it, Gretchen is one of those people. If you would like to know if you like his writing style, I recommend grabbing a copy of The Name of the Wind and just reading the prologue, because that prologue is one of the best examples of like an introduction to his world and his writing style that I have ever seen. It is a masterful like opening gambit of a book. So I recommend that, but very much like his other novella, A Slow Regard of Silent Things, which is I think my favorite work of his of all time. I think that one still is higher, even though I still loved this one. They're weird stories. They're not a traditional story structure. They're doing weird things. They have weird language, and you just have to be along for the ride and trust Rothfuss is going to take you where you need to go. I enjoyed every single second of it. That's just me. I understand why people were upset that it's not book 3, but I don't feel entitled to that. I'm perfectly happy to exist in whatever he's willing to give me. And I will wait forever, and even if it doesn't happen, that's okay with me. I know a lot of people have sort of lost faith in him, but he also has 2 young children that he's raising that are now at the like preteen teenage, and he wants to spend time with them, and I would rather him be a parent and take care of his boys than be locked away in a room writing all hours of the day. Because he's a human, and humans deserve to
Just
do
such
things.
ungrateful people,
right? Like,
I mean, there are plenty of people who are like, and I mean, I agree. Like, Rothfuss is one of those writers that I have massive respect for.
Yeah.
But like, I don't necessarily enjoy the reading process. And I understand there are plenty of people like Michaela, but like having worked in a bookstore when Slow Regard of Silent Things came out, and the number of people who were like angry at me that wasn't book 3, and like, nah, you don't. This is why we can't have nice things, y'all.
It's crazy to me that people, some of those reviews are like, this is clearly just a cash grab. I'm like, author writes book is a cash grab? Question mark. Because it's just not the book that you wanted. Like, I don't get it.
Are you aware that the author doesn't even know who you are?
Yes.
You and the author are not actually connected.
No.
And this is why Michaela and I were talking about this before we got on, and which is why I was thinking about the Emily Henry book too. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to second guess your review because it wasn't what you expected, because it was marketed to you to be something else.
Yes.
But like when he has walked out and said, I have a thing that is totally different.
Yep.
And then you're like, well, it wasn't the thing that I want. Like, sir, ma'am.
Yeah.
Non-binary person of they, them, for like, what did you think was gonna happen? It's like, I mean, when we were also like, we also worked at the bookstore when Harry Potter and the Cursed Child came out, and like the number of people, again, visibly upset with me when returning their book because it was a play and not a book. And I'm just like, I can't help you.
Yeah.
Please, why are you angry at me?
As a person who reads fan fiction, and I will read in progress fanfics, which anybody who reads fanfics knows that anytime you start a fic that is not finished, there is like a very high likelihood that it will never be finished, which is fine. It is a free thing that people put out. And I understand people like make comments about how he's a grifter because they've spent money on the books and then haven't gotten that 3rd book, so there's like a sunk cost fallacy into it. And I'm like, those books were finished. You paid money for a finished book. It's not his fault that the series isn't finished. You haven't paid money for the 3rd book yet. It's not like you've handed him your $40 for a new hardcover that doesn't exist yet. You paid for finished books. Those were finished books. You read the entire thing. Yes, the whole story is not done, but let's disregard that. I think more people need to be comfortable just enjoying the ride when it comes to things like this, because there's numerous reasons why series will never be completed. The author passes away. The publisher decides not to publish anymore. There's been authors who are like, I would love to finish the book. I would love to. The publisher doesn't want the 3rd book. The other 2 didn't sell great. You know, whatever it is. There's plenty of reasons why books don't get published and series don't get finished. That doesn't negate how good the previous things are or whether or not you enjoyed the thing that you had before. And I know that there's like a discomfort in that because you want to know how it ends and you want to have the closure that you're looking for. But it's okay to just enjoy things as they come and like not.
I mean, look at how many TV shows Netflix cancels after one season.
One season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do you know how many TV shows, or like, you know, they made the one really, really good Vampire Academy movie, but then like nobody. Sometimes good things don't end up continuing, and we're all very sad. But like,
still enjoyed the other thing. That doesn't make the other thing one star.
Yeah, and acting like he's specifically doing this like uniquely.
Yes.
It's banana peels.
Right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I'm looking, Michaela, I don't know. This is just not an author that I know. I'm sorry. But I don't know quite where to start. I'm trying to figure out if I should start with The Name of the Wind, or if I should start with this one or with another one. But I love the things you recommend. I've discovered more things that you recommend just because I don't read, you know, your and my sort of where we hang out if we're just left to our own on an island that has a library collection, only one genre. Yeah. We would probably not have any of the same books there, but you know, it's
definitely Name of the Wind.
Yes, I would start with The Name of the Wind. It is the best place to start, because the other ones are referential to it.
Yeah. Because I just love, you know, as you know, playing with language, and people who do things differently are the ones that I'm always like, I can't believe what I discovered.
Yeah. I think there's actually a video where I talk about this on the channel, actually. But like, my thing with Name of the Wind is very specifically, it opens really great. Yes. And then there's this slog part of the first part of that book that I hate with a fiery passion, because it's so boring. Like his orphan section there.
Yes, there's 50 pages that are great, 100 pages that are a slog, and then the rest of it is good forever. But you have to get through these 100 pages that are kind of boring.
Well, I will keep that in mind. And if you're telling me that someone is playing with language, I am likely to hang out, just because I love people who do. It makes, why, I don't know, but I absolutely...
His turn of phrase and syntax is very unique. It's lyrical, but not in like a pretentious way. It's not like the words are necessarily like difficult words, but the way that he is stringing words together is very unique.
Well, I think one of the things about it too is that his main character is also a musician.
Yes.
Like there's stuff with music and magic.
Yes.
And I think that that is also kind of in the, because when you talk about like lyrical, it's like, not that that isn't a defining part of the words as well, like his writing style as well. Yeah. But there's a reason that at one point they were talking about adapting it for a TV show, and they were going to have like Lin-Manuel Miranda do the music.
Yes.
Like, because like the words and the music and the magic are all like entwined. And I think that that comes out also in the way that the book is written.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited. I've got a new book to read.
Yes. Yeah. And I would recommend the audiobook with it if you are an audiobook person, Anne. I think a tandem read is the best for it. I wouldn't just do audio, but I think there is music. I think they did add like bits to the audiobook that make it a worthwhile listen on top of reading, and it also really exemplifies the way that his prose works, hearing it spoken out loud.
Yeah.
So yes, well, I loved it, highly recommend it. Whether or not, if you're a fan of Rothfuss, again, I don't think it's necessarily one that you can pick up outside of it, because it is so referential to the original texts, and he says that in the foreword, where he's like, hey, if this is your first book of mine, maybe don't start with this one. Go start with the Kingkiller Chronicles. They're better introductions to the worlds than these are. And that is true. But if you are a fan of his writing and you just want to see more of it, highly recommend this. And the illustrations are beautiful. And overall, it was just like a really great story. Highly recommend. Yeah.
Cool.
So, but to the point of the video. Is it 5 stars?
Yeah, 5 stars.
All right. Well, Michaela is the only one who came out of this with a 5-star book.
But she did. I chose Rothfuss.
but again, like I chose Emily Henry.
Yeah.
Like, not that I would never like compare their writing styles.
Yes.
Very different genres, not apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Apples and tennis balls.
Parsnips.
But like, it's an author that I have read. I haven't disliked anything. And I didn't dislike it. But anyway, I'm just saying that like, sometimes you pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No author with their next book is a guarantee.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, honestly, having a really, really fantastic book of theirs that you read last time is almost like a disservice to the next book, because you're always thinking back to that great book and then just being like,
right,
why is this
not
this?
Yeah.
So I will say that, I mean, yes, you can trust authors, and I have authors that I trust, but it's not a given.
No.
So you didn't cheat, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. That was my book.
So our final segment of this, before we let y'all go, is our bracket. And so, as you all know, we have been showing our participants our reading bracket that we are going through. So if you haven't heard about this, or you're just checking in with a reading roundtable for this, Michaela and I went back through every single reading roundtable that existed prior to 2026. And we made a bracket for each of us of books that we wanted to read. And as we've been going through the months, we have been having our participants pick the books from one of the brackets to move forward. And then by middle of the year-ish, we should have a winner that Michaela and I will read and review. That will have been, again, we want to read all these books, but the actual winner will have been voted upon by our participants. And normally the participants have to argue about this, which you don't usually see on camera. We, pause, edit it out, and then they have to come to a consensus. Since Anne is the only person here, Anne just gets to hold all of the power and make that decision for us.
Cool.
So, Anne, would you like to tell all of the lovely people what books you have decided to move forward for myself and for Michaela?
Yes, for Gretchen, I chose The Personal Librarian. This is a book that I read, and it is one of the few that I have purchased and actually put on my shelf, and I have actually read it more than once, more because I learned things about our universe that I never knew about before. And so, given that Gretchen and I worked in libraries and have a vague fondness and never had the kind of power that this librarian has, and that we would take probably being a personal librarian anywhere. I really like the book, so I'm pushing that one on you, Gretchen, or sending that one forward. And the book that I chose for Michaela, I chose because of that it's not set in this universe. It's a science fiction, sort of a science fiction book, and that is Sea of Tranquility. And really, it was primarily just as Michaela, I know you read science fiction, and this one is vaguely set sci-fi. So I'm assuming you might find it more interesting than the other. The other didn't, I'm sure it's a good book, but
it didn't scream me to you. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very superficial reason, but there was just something about this one. This is the one that I would read myself fundamentally if I was choosing between the two books. Shelf reading, cover wise, the title script wise.
Yeah. Well, and we read a very long time ago for Bibliomancy for Beginners, our original book club that started the channel, Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11.
Yes.
Which was amazing.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see if that one gets pushed forward for you as well.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we have done our duty. We have talked about these books, which was, it's very interesting, like these complex feelings that come up when you go into a book with such high expectations, because I feel like it's fundamentally a different reading experience than when you go into a book and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just here for a good time, hopefully. Which is why we wanted to do this as a challenge, because it just kind of changes your whole, like, you know, thought process about the reading, and it adds a level to it. And I think fundamentally none of us read a bad book, but we did read some complex books.
Mm.
So it was a really, really great discussion. So we would like to thank Anne for joining us again, and all of you for watching or listening. Next month is a wee bit tricky for Betwixt content, because I am doing a very intense all week writing retreat for my dissertation. And then I am going to a conference. So we are thinking maybe we're going to do our Sapphic Western prompt from our buddy reading challenge. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go watch our buddy reading challenges for this year. And then next month we will have another unthemed reading roundtable. We tend to do every other to like bring in some structure and then unleash the chaos. So we have our participants all signed up for that. So at the very least, we will see you there. And then if we manage a Sapphic Western, come for that. Otherwise, we'll be doing, I'm sure, something else silly and weird and just uniquely us. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.